counter-espionage?
My last role at Facebook was in counter-espionage.
Your last role, okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things, this is a very different topic, and I only got a minute or so left, but right now is Facebook, I know Facebook is not allowed in countries like China, but do they provide platforms for authoritarian or terrorist-based leaders like the Ayatollahs in Iran? That's the largest state-sponsored terrorism in the world. This century, a communist party dictator who's trying to export his authoritarian model around the world. Leaders who, in my view, clearly don't hold America's interests in mind. This Facebook.
The counter-espionage team. My team directly worked on tracking Chinese, that you could actually find the Chinese based on them doing these kinds of things.
So Facebook, I'm sorry.
We also saw active participation of, say, the Iran government doing espionage on other. Consistent understaffing of the counter-espionage, information operations, and counterterrorism teams is a national security issue. And I'm speaking.
Or not is being utilized by some of our adversaries in a way that helps push and promote their interests at the expense of America's?
Yes, Facebook's still very aware that this is happening on the platform, and I believe it's because you have a right to keep the American people safe.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Sullivan. You may have just opened an area.
Sorry, yeah, I have strong national security concerns.
Not being at all facetious. Thank you for your questions on this topic, and I know you have a busy schedule, but we can. If you'd be willing to come back for another hearing, that certainly is within the realm of possibility. I haven't consulted the ranking member, but or the Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. First off, thanks for coming forward, and thanks for coming forward in the manner that you wanted to have positive change. Platforms asking them to detail the harmful impacts, good effects on mental health their platforms have on children and teens. So your reports reveal that Facebook has been cluing them. So I think we all agree that's completely unacceptable. And we've got to figure out how we protect the people that are vulnerable in this country from the harmful impacts of Facebook and others. For age when it comes to using any social media?
I strongly encourage raising age limits to 16 or 18 years old based on looking at the data around problematic use or addiction on the platform and children's self-regulation issues.
So they figured it out internally that they were having an adverse impact on young people, especially young women. Why didn't they come forward and say, we've got a problem, we've got to figure this out?
A little trapped and isolated is the problems that are driving negative social comparison on Instagram. Facebook's own research says, or Snapchat or Reddit, because TikTok is about doing fun, vaguely about ideas, but Instagram is about bodies and about comparing lifestyles. And so I think there are real questions where I don't think those answers are immediately obvious. But that's why I believe we need to solve problems together and not alone, because collaborating with the public will give us better solutions.
So do you think?
I think within the set of incentives that they were working within, they did the best they could. Unfortunately, those incentives are not sustainable and they are not acceptable.
To be required to report any harmful effects they have on young people?
One of the things that I found very interesting after what the company said, Facebook needs to be able to have private research. And the part that I was offended by this was Facebook has had some of this research on the negative effects of Instagram on teenagers for years. I strongly support the idea that Facebook should have a year, maybe 18 months to have private research, but given that they are the only people in the world.
So,
because to be clear, if they make $40 billion a year, they have the resources to solve these problems.
Eventually, right?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier to Senator Hickenlooper, right, coming in and having oversight might actually research shows they have something called an integrity holdout. These are people who don't get protections from integrity systems to see what happens to them. Could reason a kinder, friendlier, more collaborative Facebook might actually have more users 5 years from now. So it's in everyone's interest.
Do you think, I've got a bill and there's platforms to use algorithms on somebody. You agree with that? I mean, shouldn't we consent before they get things to us?
For selling personal data, that is an issue I believe people should have substantially more control over. Most people are not well informed on what the personal costs of having their data sold are. And so I worry to working with algorithms. I worry that if Facebook is allowed to give users the choice of, do you want an event-based newsfeed or do you want a that people will choose the more addictive option, that engagement-based ranking, even if it is leading their daughters to eating disorders.
All right. Thank you.
Who is online and not hearing anyone, let's go to the second round. I think at 1:30, so we'll be respectful of that limitation. And I'll begin by asking a few questions. First, let me say, raise with you the principal obstacle to our achieving legislative reform in the past, which is the tons of money influence peddling, to use a pejorative word, that is so evident here in the United States Congress. Some of it's dark money, some of it is very overt. I guess the point I'd like to make to you personally is that you're being our nation, that one person can really make a difference. One person standing up, speaking out, by our consciousness here, you have been a catalyst, I think, for change in a way that we haven't seen, and I've been working on these issues. You have raised awareness in a way that I think is very unique. So thank you not only for your risk-taking and your and I also want to make another point. You can tell me whether I'm correct or not. I think there are other whistleblowers out there. I think there are other truth tellers in the tech world who want to come forward. And I think you're to make this industry more responsible and more caring about kids and about the nature of our public discourse generally, and about the strength of our democracies out there in potentially coming forward. I think that's tremendously important. And I think also, and again, you can tell me if I'm wrong, there are a lot of people in Facebook reports, and I know of some of my friends in this world who tell me that there are people working for Facebook who would feel a lot of reservations about the way that Facebook has used the platform, used this way. So those are sort of hypotheses that I hope, because a lot of parents are watching right now. So you've advised us on what you think we should do, the reforms, some better disclosure, because right now Facebook essentially is a black box for most of America. Facebook is a black box. Mark Zuckerberg and his immediate coterie, and the buck stops with him. And reform of Section 203, so there's some legal responsibility. So people have a day in court, some kind of recourse. Most of America has no idea. Essentially, you can't sue Facebook. You have no, and if you push a lot of members of Congress, they wouldn't know either.
It's actually slightly worse than that because they had immunity, right? The 230 gave them immunity, so why should they have to tell the truth about what they're showing?
Which is kind of
Shocking.
Well, it is shocking to which some of us are, and for the very legal structure that gives them in corporate conduct, at least in court. So you've reforms that you think are important, a lot of what is going on in this black box. But for now, since a lot of teens, and to endure the bullying, the eating disorders, the invitations to feel insecure, haunted for their lifetimes by these experiences. What would you tell parents right now? What would you advise them? And some of the proposals that have been mentioned here would give parents more tools to protect their children. Right now, a lot of parents, they need more information. They're way behind their kids in their adeptness online. Protect their kids in the real world right now in real time. So I offer you that open-ended opportunity.
Very rarely do you have one of these generational shifts where the generation that leads, like parents who guide their children, text to support their children in a safe way. There is an active need to make established information where if parents want to learn how they can support their kids, it should be easy for them to know what is constructive and not constructive, because their parents can't guide them. And one of the things I'm saddest when I look on Twitter is when people blame the parents for these problems with Facebook. They say, just take your kids.
I think it can be really hard for many of us to fully appreciate the impact that certain posts may have, including, I would add, on a teen's mental health. So can you discuss the short and long-term consequences of body image issues on these platforms, please?
The way they conceptualize who they are, how they conceptualize how they interact with other people. I'm very scared about the upcoming generation because when you and I interact in person and I say something mean to you and I see you wince or I see you cry, that makes me less likely to do it the next time, right? That's a feedback. They learn to be incredibly cruel to each other. Okay to be treated badly by people who allegedly care about them. That's a scary future.
Very scary future on a regular basis. Are there other specific issues of significant consequence that the general public may not be fully aware of that testimony?
One of the things that's hard for people who don't look at the data of social network laws, it means that a small number of users are extremely intensely engaged on any given topic, and most people who are recently widowed, divorced, moved to a burden. Like the idea that when people are exposed to ideas that are not true over and over again, it erodes their ability. The fact that Facebook knows that its most vulnerable users, people who are recently widowed, like that they're isolated, and people look at 2,000 posts a day. Right? And it breaks my heart, the idea that these rabbit holes.
Ms. Hodgin, yeah. I desperately want to, which is the American impulse, I want to solve this problem. Congress not only has a role, but has a responsibility to figure this out. I don't pretend to have all the answers. Facebook would solve any of the problems that you've discussed today. Do you think it would?
So as an algorithmic specialist, so this is someone who designs algorithmic experiences, I'm actually against the break inside of just Facebook itself. So not even Facebook and Instagram are about the design of algorithms of AI and the idea that AI is not intelligent. And if you break up Instagram and Facebook from each other, it's like advertising platforms that they want to learn. They got one platform for Instagram and Facebook. Radically fewer dollars per user. And what I'm scared of, and Facebook will continue to be this Frankenstein that is altering, that is endangering lives that exist and be dangerous even if broken up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Crazy.
I have
this is
text
motherfucking crazy.
Spokesperson, Angela Stone. It said Instagram or research these issues and has no direct knowledge of the topic from her work at targeting of children. If they want to discuss their practices, I am extending to you an invitation to step forward, be sworn in, and testify before your testimony. One quick question for you. What's the biggest threat to Facebook's existence? Is it greed? Is it for teenage users? What is the biggest threat to their existence?
I think the fact that every little individual decision may seem like it helps with growth, but if it makes it to more, back in 2018, Facebook's own research said that users said it made it less meaningful. Right? To pull it away from business as usual, help it write new rules if we want it to be successful in the future.
Senator Klobuchar is waiting, so I'll yield my time back, and I thank you.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you for your leadership. And all three of us are on the Judiciary Committee, so we're also working on a host of other issues, including the App Store issues, which is unrelated, promote their own content or engage in exclusionary conduct, which I know is not our topic today. I see the thumbs up from you, Ms. Haugen, which I appreciate. For these tech platforms goes beyond the kid protection that we so dearly need to do. And I just want to make
a couple of weeks ago about Facebook using its own platform to promote positive news about itself. I was like, wow, I knew you shaped our reality.
Senator Lujan and I have put together an exception, actually, to the 230 immunity when it comes to anti-vaccine misinformation. And I've long called on Facebook to take similar steps. They've taken some steps. We know the effect of this. We know that over half the people that you, which is false, I'm just saying that for the record here, could, in case it gets put on social media, could you talk about, are there enough?
It has the capability to stop vaccine misinformation because they're overly reliant on artificial intelligence systems that they themselves say will likely never.
One of the world's biggest companies that we've ever known, and that's what really bothers me. Here, Senator Lujan and I also have pointed out for content in Spanish and other languages besides English.
One of the things that documentation that shows how much operational investment that I'm deeply concerned about Facebook's ability to operate in a safe way in languages beyond maybe
the potential for eating disorder content to be shown to these children raises serious concerns. Senator Blumenthal's been working on this. I've long been focused on this eating disorder issue. Rates. Are you aware of the platform are nudged towards content related to eating disorders or unhealthy diet practices? CNN also did investigation on this front.
I have not seen specific studies that indicates that they are aware that teenagers coach tweens who are on the platform to not reveal too much, to and that the marketing team should try to advertise to teenagers to stop coaching tweens that way. I believe we've shared that document with Congress.
Facebook has tried to downplay the internal research that was done, saying it was unreliable. In your view, are the internal researchers at Facebook who examine how users are, is it fair for Facebook to throw them under the bus?
Facebook has one of the top ranked research programs in the tech industry, like any other social media platform. Some of the biggest heroes inside the word truths. The fact that Facebook is throwing them under the bus, I think, is unacceptable. And I just want the researchers to know that I stand with them and that I see them.
Or maybe we should say, as the name of one book, these are outside researchers.
I am deeply concerned. So for context, for those who are not familiar with this research, how they are distributed. These are advertisements that influence our democracy and how it operates. Facebook lashed out at them and even banned some of their individual accounts. The fact that Facebook is so scared of even basic transparency that it goes out to do federal research and federal regulations on this.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Markey.
As early as 2012, Facebook has wanted to allow children under the age of 12 to use its platform. And whether the company intended to serve targeted ads at children. Now, here we are, 9 social media companies from invading the privacy of our children, 12 and under. Leads to harming teens, stoking division, damaging our democracy. That's what you've told us today. So, Ms. Hogan, I want you to come back to the protections that you are calling on us to enact. This isn't complicated. We're going to be told online all day with these paid the Facebook people, oh, Congress can't act. They're not experts. It's too complicated for Congress. Just get out of the way. You're not experts. Well, my bill's to protect kids because it would cost them money. That's how complicated it is. So let's start with the Kids Act that Senator Blumenthal answers peddle products while they flaunt their lavish lifestyles to young users. Can you explain how allowing influencer marketing to teens?
The business model that provides a great deal of the content on Instagram is one where people produce content for free. They put it on Instagram for free. But many of those content creators have sponsorships. Facebook needs those content creators to continue to make content so that we will view content and in the process view more ads who do influencer marketing, because it gives them the supply of content that allows them to keep people on the platform, viewing more ads, making more money for them.
Yeah. Children's Television Act. What does that do? Well, it says to all the television networks in America, stop preying upon children. Stop. We had to pass a law that banned television stations from doing this. That's why I knew that after now in the Googles and the Facebooks and all the other companies, pretty obvious. And of course, the industry said, no way we're going to have privacy laws for adults. And they blocked me from putting that on the books in 1996. But at least for children, I got up to age 12. That's we also know that as time has moved on, they've become even more sophisticated. Features such as likes and follower counts that quantify popularity.
Just to make sure, so I am only familiar with issues around the research I have seen with regard to quantifiable popularity is that as long as comments are allowed, so this is not a quantitative thing, this is just comments, as long as doesn't fix the social comparison problem. That, you know, teenage girls are smart, they see that Sally is prettier than the interventions than just removing quantitative measures. Facebook has a product that is kind of addictive. And those kinds of things, like having lots of little feedback loops, keeps kids engaged. And like I mentioned earlier, part of why you produced more content. And so having those systems of little rewards makes people produce more content, which means we...
that Senator Blumenthal and I are advocating for also prohibits amplification of dangerous and violent content to children and teens. Can you explain how algorithms...
I don't think Facebook ever set out to intentionally promote divisive, extreme, polarizing content. I do think, though, that they are algorithmic-based ranking, so engagement-based ranking, keeps you on their sites longer. You have longer sessions, you show up more often.
Quantify popularity as a starting point in legislation.
As I covered before, the internal research I've seen is a huge impact on social comparison. So I do believe we need to have a more integrated solution for these issues.
Okay. Should we ban
oversight in terms of, I think the algorithms will likely still learn the interests of kids and match ads to those kids.
Targeting children.
I don't know what fraction of their revenue comes from children.
Okay, so ultimately children are not commodities.
No.
They've always been given, this is all about. They've always been given this special safety zone so that children can grow up without being preyed upon. Salesman would knock on the front door. My mother would just say, tell him I'm not home. That man is not getting into our living room. Well, I would say to my we need to give parents the ability just to say, no one's home for you and your company and your attempts to prey upon children, to get into our living room. That's our moment in history. We have to make sure that we respond to the challenge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Mark. As you've heard, he was a champion in the House of Representatives before coming here, well before I was in the United States. honored to work with him on legislation now going forward, and I join him in thanking you. I have just a few concluding questions, and I seem to be the last one left standing here, so the good news is I don't think we'll have others, but as you may, an Instagram user identified as a 13-year-old girl. She followed a few easily identifiable accounts on. She was deluged, literally, within a day of content pushed to her by algorithms that self-injury and eating disorders. Are you surprised by that fact?
I'm not surprised by that fact. Facebook has from things like interest in healthy recipes, so not even extreme dieting. And because of the nature of engagement-based ranking and amplification of interests, that account was pushed towards extreme dieting and pro-anorexia content very rapidly.
And that's the algorithm.
That's the algorithm. From having worked at Pinterest, Pinterest used to be an application that was heavily based just on you follow certain people's pins, and those are put into your feed. And over time, it grew to be much, much more heavily based on recommendations that the algorithm would figure out on human interactions. So these are human scale technologies, not computers choosing what we focus on.
So on being deluged with these kinds of content would want that kind of algorithm changed.
Parents deserve more options and more choices, and today they don't know even what they could be asking for.
I just received by text, literally, and I'm going to read it to you. It's from a dad. With Francis Haugen. My 15-year-old daughter loved her body at 14, was on Instagram constantly, hating her body dysmorphia, now anorexia, and was in deep, deep trouble before we found treatment.